Okie dokie. I don't know where to go from here. All righty. Leviticus 11:45. No, that's all right. You ain't got to listen to her. You never have. All right. No, that's not true. You going to give it a try? All right, let it rip. Well, you're on the right track, yeah. Yeah, you did all right. You were right on the right track. You were right there. Well, there it is. All right. Great job. It's supposed to rain today? That's the old saying, right? If you don't like the weather in Indiana, wait 5 minutes, apparently, yeah. All right, Leviticus 11:45. Anybody else would like to try? I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. All right, does anybody want to try one from another week? Ooh, setting the bar high here. We're going back into the recesses. In the beginning. Everybody's like, well, we can do that one. God created the heavens and the earth. That's good. That's good. That's a good one to know. When we were in that lesson, oh man, we could spend weeks talking about the implications of that verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is so incredible to think of all the implications and all the things that come out of those simple but in few words. It's amazing. Well, tonight we are going to be picking up, fast forwarding in time a little bit. Actually, quite a bit. Last week, who did we discuss primarily? Was there an individual or anything that we talked about? Wasn't so much an individual as it was a concept, right? Now, 2 weeks ago, the individual was Abraham. And then we move forward into the concept of holiness born out of the law. Well, not born out of the law, but explained in the law in Leviticus. Of course, the standard of holiness, was it in existence? Was the call to holiness out there before the law? Certainly. So there's always been some sort of a standard where people have been called to live according to that standard, their law code and whatnot. So, but the law of Moses really spelled things out, especially for the nation of Israel, which was coming into being at that time as they came out of Egypt in the Exodus. And so we talked about Leviticus and the laws that was given. And now we're going to talk about Jesus and Moses. And so this is a very significant verse. And this actually brings out an interesting theological discipline, an interesting theological concept that is exemplified by this verse. We'll see if we can figure out what that is before we get in here. I will raise up from them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. So, who's speaking? Yeah, God's speaking to Moses. And so when he says, I will raise up for them a prophet like you, so it's a prophet like Moses from among their brothers. Who's that? Yeah, it's going to come. Someone's going to follow from out of the 12 tribes, right? And so out of those brothers, out of the 12 tribes, what tribe did it end up being? Judah, right? From the tribe of Judah, from the brothers, and he's going to raise up a prophet, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. So, this represents a certain discipline or a certain theological discipline, a certain theological I'm searching for the right word here. Area of study. So, what does anybody know? Randy, you may not answer this. I always tell Randy, I said, man, just speak up and say what you want to say, and I enjoy his contributions, but now I'm telling him don't do it. So, what does this represent? What is this an example of a certain discipline or a type of study or that we see? What's that? Typology. This is what we would call typology. So this was the class in high school that they used to have, where you used to learn how to type. That's not what we're talking about here. Do they still do typing classes? Like how you learn how? I know they do computers. Keyboarding is what it's called. Well, that's an important skill, very important skill. I mean, you know how it is if you're not skilled in keyboarding or you witness someone who's not, looks like an angry woodpecker. So it's something good. But typology. So Randy, in a nutshell, I'm putting you on the spot. I just told Kelly tonight I don't normally put people on the spot, but I'm putting Randy on the spot. Can you just sum up typology in a quick sentence? Or okay, it's a specific type of prophecy. Okay. Yes. Yep. Yep. Excellent. And so, as I understand it, Ethan Rolfe is teaching at Liberty on Tuesday nights. And the basic idea is that the tabernacle is a type of the church. And I think that's the essence of the whole class, is looking at all the design in the original tabernacle, but that it was actually foreshadowing the church and everything that would be involved in it that was coming up. So what we have here is a type, and so there's different areas or things or peoples that can be types. In fact, at the end of this chapter, let's go ahead and say it, there's a book that's recommended, The New Moses, a Matthean Typology. I have no clue about that book, have not read it. I'm assuming it's probably really solid. A lot of the book recommendations thus far have been really good. A book I would recommend that I know is good is Biblical Typology by James E. Smith, by Doc Smith. And so he talks about a lot of that same stuff in here too. And so if this type of study interests you, that's a good resource. Is anybody familiar with the book recommended here? Donnie, is this one that you know of? Have you ever read? He probably has it. That don't mean he read it. Okay, so Donnie's got lots of books, which is good for me because I get to borrow them. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this what in essence is typology, talking about this very specifically and in quite a bit of detail about the relationship the foreshadowing, the connections between Moses' life and Jesus. Now, the ultimate question we're answering here is, did Jesus fulfill the promise to replace Moses? Well, God promised that the Messiah would be someone like Moses. Now, this prophecy wasn't wasted on the rabbis. They viewed Moses as the model for the future Messiah. Christians took their cue from them, portraying Jesus as the new Moses. And there are some good parallels here, right? So, both were liberators. So, what do we mean by that? Both were liberators. Okay. Okay, so Moses led his people out of slavery in Egypt, free out of bondage, and Jesus leads us out of slavery to sin. That's a good parallel. Both were lawgivers. How so? Okay. Hold on. That was like a wave. Whoosh. Okay. All right. Over here first, then we'll come over back this way. So go ahead. Okay. So, all right. So Christ fulfilled the law. Did Jesus, was he a lawgiver in any sense? We understand that Moses was the one who was given the law and then brought it to the people and all that kind of stuff. We understand that. But in what sense would Jesus be a lawgiver? Okay, he was the Word. Yeah, right. You remember that phrase? Yeah, so in that sense, he did a new command I give to you. Yeah, you have heard, but I say, and so there were times. So Jesus, I'm a little hesitant or to be very careful when we say, oh man, I'm glad we don't live under the law. And that is true when we don't live under the law of Moses. But sometimes I think that gives the impression like that was hard, this is easy. Do you ever get that impression? It was hard to live under that law, to keep all that stuff, but over here, in Christianity, this is easy. And I think that's a lot of what Christianity looks like today, is that it's easy believism or cheap grace, meaning God's grace is sufficient. I can basically do what I want and then come here. And I would say, did all the tomatoes that were dispersed today get taken home? And the peppers and stuff? Or did everybody get them home safely? The stuff that yeah. Okay, hear me on this. Don't throw nothing. I think there's a lot of people in the Christian church that look at this table as an excuse to do whatever they want during the week. Are you hearing me? I can do what I want, but as long as I come get this, I'm good. I think more people look at it like that than we realize. Now, in essence, that's no different than whom? Catholic Church. We've turned this into a sacrament which gives us salvation. What's that? Okay, well, I'm talking about in the Christian church, Church of Christ, places, and I'm talking about people that attend regularly. I think they come here and they treat this like the way they get their sins forgiven. All right, don't say I throw anything. What would make them think that? I think that we have communicated sometimes in such a way that we have turned this into a sacrament. Not saying you can't overemphasize the importance, because you're not going to get me to say this is not important. But I think some people look at this as a sacrament in that it brings salvation to me. And I think that mindset is more predominant than we believe. So, both were liberators, both were lawgivers, both were shepherds. Jesus was a carpenter. Moses was he a shepherd? Okay, so is that the correlation that's being made here? Okay, so when we talk about Moses being a shepherd, do you think we're referring to his animal care days? We're talking to his people care days, right? Yeah. Man, what a responsibility. Whew. You know, we're going to be taking 45 people up to the ark, and I feel responsible for making sure everybody is cared for and gotten there and everything's good and all that kind of stuff. But could you imagine 2 million people or 1 million people, however many was in the wilderness? Everybody. And they were all very kind to him and did not complain. Patient. Shepherds. Jesus, in what sense is he a shepherd? Trenton? Okay. What? Luke 15. Explain the reference in Luke 15. What's it say? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very good. Yep. Jesus is spoken of in that term, so he is a shepherd. There's more that we could talk about. And the great shepherd, yes. Now, to compare any Jew to the founder of the nation in that time was an outrageous claim. So you have any person in the Jewish culture in first century Jerusalem, Israel, that says, you know, here we have it, this person right here. This is the one like Moses. Here he is. And in fact, he's way better. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, both were rescued as infants in Egypt. That's interesting. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tested in the wilderness and suffered for the nation. That's good. And there's more that we could look at. The stuff that Doc Smith has, if we have time, we might talk about it. Thank you. To compare any Jew to the founder of the nation was an outrageous claim. Such a bold claim is better demonstrated than merely stated. Hence, most of the comparisons of Jesus to Moses in the New Testament are allusions rather than assertions. Even so, the sheer volume offers a compelling case that Jesus fulfilled this messianic prophecy. Is there any doubt that Jesus fulfilled this messianic prophecy? Why is there any doubt that, or could there be any doubt that this isn't about, that Jesus isn't the one like Moses? Could there be any doubt? Like, well, he might be talking about something else. Is there any doubt? For us, for here and now, could there be any doubt that this, I mean, if they're just allusions, and that's fine to say that they're allusions, that there's no specific assertions, but Jesus fulfilled the law and the prophets and every messianic prophecy. Now, if Jesus fulfilled, let's just throw out a number, 45 of the messianic prophecies and say there's 50, then logic would dictate what? Well, hold on. I stated my... Jesus, if you've gone through and figured out, okay, he's fulfilled 45 of these, and you've got 5 more to go, what's the logical conclusion? I'm asking my question really poorly here. Help me. Yeah, I mean, in all essence, if he fulfills one, he fulfills them all. Thank you for bailing me out there. You guys are really helping me tonight. I appreciate it. I mean, after the beginning thing, whatever that was, I heard something about getting shot. He said, shoot number 2. What did he mean by that? Oh, shoot. Oh, I thought I was the second one to come up here and you were shooting me. I was totally lost. I get it. All right. All right. I'm telling my joke now. Oh, okay. Oh. I got a good joke later if you want to talk to me afterwards. And it's not true. All right. Shoot number 2. All right. Context. I wasn't really paying attention, to be honest. All right, so. Okay. All right, so let's do a flyover of the New Testament to see how these allusions stack up. We can start with Jesus himself. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, 6 times we read something to the effect of, Moses said, but I say. Pretty gutsy, right? I mean, if we look at the Sermon on the Mount on the whole, it was really incredible. But in the middle of that, now who's the audience? Who's primary audience? Sermon on the Mount. Primary audience is going to be Jews. There's probably Gentiles present too, but primary audience, Jews. And to say, Moses said, then to put the word but I say, pretty gutsy. In fact, it's a little more than gutsy. I mean, you think of the impact of that statement? I'm trying to think of a corollary. Yeah. Yeah. Gary? Oh, yeah. So Jesus was just a timid little kitty cat of a person, never really, he was just kind of timid and meek. I mean, he stirred things up a little bit. So, in that way, I can say that Griff and Danny are very Christ-like. You know how many times I've been in a family gathering where there's little conversations taking place. Griff will roll up to the conversation, lob in a grenade, and then walk away. And then the people there are after each other. I've seen it. Yeah, we're not talking about just the 2 of you. All right, so. Pretty gutsy given the religious climate to say Moses said, but I say. Jesus clearly saw himself not merely as an authoritative interpreter of the Mosaic Law, which he was, but as one who could fulfill and extend that divine law. And this is where I was saying earlier about when we say that, I'm glad I don't have to keep the Old Testament law. I get that because it was messy and a little unusual, and some of it was just downright strange. But to give the impression that we don't have to do much as a Christian, Jesus extended the law in a lot of ways. And when we say extending, it's really deepening or intensifying. So Matthew seemed to agree, shaping his entire book in the shadow of Moses. Beginning with his birth, Jesus mirrored Moses. In Egypt, he was saved from a tyrannical despot. So let's see who was the tyrannical despot that Moses dealt with. Pharaoh. Moses. Hold on to that answer, Danny, for the next one. Yeah, and then Jesus, the tyrannical despot, was, Danny? Herod. Very good. And so he survived his testing in the wilderness after passing through water. All right, so what's the corollary here? So let's talk about Moses. Was he tested in the wilderness? We already alluded to this a little bit. What about Jesus? In what way was Jesus tested in the wilderness? Tempted. Yeah. And so when did the testing happen for Moses? What water event? Okay, before that. Yeah, the Red Sea, passing through the Red Sea. What water event with Jesus occurred before he was tempted in the wilderness? His baptism, his immersion by John the Baptist. Interesting. Jesus's 5 major sermons mirror the Torah. What's the Torah? What's another word for the Torah? You learn some fancy Hebrew. Pentateuch. Yeah, the Torah or the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, those are all synonymous terms for the same thing. So if you see Torah, Pentateuch, 5 books of Moses, the law of Moses, the writings of Moses. Both Jesus and Moses were known as humble leaders. Moses and Jesus have a conversation on top of the mountain during the Transfiguration. That's interesting. You know, something occurred to me as I was reading this. And I can't say that I've ever, there's a lot of things that you can study in the Bible. 1 or 2. And I don't recall, digging into all the facets of the Transfiguration. It's something I want to do, I need to do. But I'm sure this is in the commentators and stuff. But understanding the Transfiguration, who was present? Who all was present? Okay, well, who else? Peter, James, and John, and Jesus. And then who showed up? Moses and... Okay, so what did Moses and Elijah represent? Law and the prophets. And so Jesus is transfigured and his glory is shining there. And so if you think about it from a completion and or glorification or authority over or completing of, the Transfiguration was kind of a declaration of all this coming together in the person of Jesus Christ, and he is the ultimate authority. So Moses and Elijah are important, but he's over all of it. The fulfillment of all of it. And that's interesting because when we've studied this in the book of John, and also in other places in the Gospels, when Jesus said, who do people say I am? What were some of the answers? What were normally people would answer? They would say, Elijah or Moses were the 2 most prominent answers, right? Yeah, one like Moses or Elijah. And so that's who they were looking for because that's who they felt was going to be the ultimate authority, and the Messiah might even be them again. But Jesus, in that moment, sure. Well, let's see what it says. Who would he be teaching? Peter, James, and John? Let's see what was said. Okay, and it's really a summary. Yeah, and behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. I think I have a really good answer for this. I don't think we have a clue what was said. I mean, you could surmise, but Man, what would that have discussion look like? Hey, how's it going? I have no idea. I mean, I don't think we have any evidence as to what was really said here. That's a fascinating thought. Yeah, I would think so. Moses and Elijah are, fancy way of saying it, done gone. Yes. They recognize Moses and Elijah. Yeah, that teaches us something, right? What other passage of Scripture does that work with when we talk about the fact that Moses and Elijah were recognized in that moment? Yeah, that one too. Yep, when Samuel was brought back, he wasn't happy about that. That reminds me of Lazarus too, but that's a whole other story. Yeah, the rich man and Lazarus, and that we retain our identity while we are in the intermediate state. Fascinating thought. Okay, a lot of things here we could talk about. Well, good question. Finally, Jesus' Last Supper was during the Passover meal that Moses established. Guys, that's so incredibly significant. Clearly, Moses foreshadowed Jesus, was a type of, you could say. This is nothing wrong with saying that. Now, you want to be careful with this. I just want to say this. Not every foreshadow is a type. Not everything is a type. Sometimes people take typology way too far. So, just be careful with that. Now, for Luke, it's clearly not enough to equate Jesus with Moses. Notice the word equate. Jesus, in his view, is greater by far than Moses. First, at the Transfiguration, Luke recorded God's voice, and this is significant. I think sometimes we skip over this. He says, listen to him. This is, in essence, the same thing we heard at his baptism. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. Over Moses, who was there. Jesus is the unparalleled Son of God. Later, Luke recorded this vivid declaration by Paul about Jesus. Quote, by him, everyone who believes is freed from everything from which you could not be freed by the law of Moses. Now, there's another book in the Bible that takes this dynamic, not just in Moses, but talking about the superiority of Jesus in relationship to the law. What book of the Bible is that? Yeah, the book of Hebrews. Right? Greater than. Jesus is greater than. Now, turning from Luke to John's Gospel, we see the superiority of Jesus, the Messiah, over Moses, the prophet. Now, does this in any way denigrate Moses or make him less than? Does this push him down? Like, you guys must really hate Moses. See, that's what our society does today, doesn't it? I really like sausage and mushroom on my pizza. Well, you don't like pepperoni? You hate pepperoni? What's wrong with you? You hate pepperoni. You're a hater. I just like sausage and mushroom. People tend to take things in today as if you don't declare everything as equals, then that means you hate something, or that you're belittling. And that's not at all what we're doing here. Not at all. Now think about this. The one whom would be like Moses was greater than him, and was Jesus. What an honor. The one who my life exemplified and was taken in the future was actually Jesus the Messiah. Man, what an honor. So we're not denigrating Moses at all. So in John's Gospel, in John chapter 3, Jesus alluded to Numbers 21, 4 through 9. When deadly vipers went on a rampage, striking the rebellious Israelites, Moses pleaded with God to relent. His solution was to have Moses place a bronze serpent on a pole and lift it up, right? Anyone who looked at the raised serpent by faith was healed of the venomous bite. Jesus compared his crucifixion to the bronze serpent of Moses. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him. Now, 2 chapters later, we've studied all this in our Wednesday night study in John. we find Jesus debating with the religious leader. Moses was called to testify. So Jesus, remember, he went through and brought all these things that were going to testify to him. The Father, John the Baptist, the Word, Moses was one that Jesus called to the witness stand and said, Moses testifies of me. Yeah. Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, on whom you have set your hope. So you say you believe in Moses, right? You say Moses is the greatest. Well, if Moses is the greatest, then y'all need to pay attention, because Moses is speaking of me. And if you believe Moses, if you really understand it, then you'll believe me. Yeah, for if you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? Thus, in both chapters 3 and 5 of John, Jesus is superior to Moses, not his equal. Not only does Jesus fulfill the prediction of Moses, he also supersedes the person of Moses. Now, in the very next chapter of John, there's a whole discussion about manna, right? We talked about the manna. Right? So a lot of times they were like, well, Moses gave us manna in the wilderness, so he was better. He fed us every day. You just fed us this one time. Right? Well, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven, for the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Clearly, Jesus claimed to be superior to Moses. He wasn't merely God's messenger. In this case, he very specifically states that he was God's gift, the very bread of life. Furthermore, the Israelites under Moses ate manna and what? Died. But Jesus is the bread from heaven that provides eternal life. Now, this text exalts Jesus well above Moses. Now, Paul. So, we have Matthew, and there's lots of things in Matthew. John, many places in the Gospel of John, and then Paul likewise drew a parallel between the first and second Redeemers. For him, Jesus is far superior. This is clearly seen in his allegory in 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 4 about the wilderness wandering of Moses. Here, Jesus isn't compared to Moses, the liberator, which seems like an obvious enough connection. Instead, Jesus is the rock from which the Israelites drank. All drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. In other words, Moses was God's messenger to Israel, but Jesus was God's gift to Israel. Now, John 6 focused on the manna and the bread of life. 1 Corinthians focused on the rock and the water of life. Both exalt Jesus above Moses. Another example comes from 2 Corinthians, when Paul recalled the incident in Exodus 34:33. Okay, so someone look that up real quick. Exodus 34:33. And it's a race. Who can get there first? Maybe there aren't that many trying. Anybody? You got it? Let it rip, Tater Chip. Okay, why did he put a veil over his face? Yeah, and was literally like radiating the glory of God. What would that have looked like? Incredible. So after Moses met with God on Mount Sinai, his face shone because he had been in the presence of God. He somehow absorbed a bit of God's glory. We don't understand what this looks like or how it happened, but something happened. The effect was not long-lived, however. Moses veiled his face after speaking to the crowd so they wouldn't see the glory fading. Who knows how many times he repeated this cycle? Talk to God, talk to the crowd, cover his fading face. When Paul compared Moses with Jesus, he compared the fading glory of Moses with the unfading glory of Jesus on the Christian. We all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of God, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. Now, I like that translation because what are some other translations say that? How do they do that last phrase there? From one degree of glory to another. It says from glory to glory. It's a little confusing. Now, for this comes from the Lord who is Spirit. Here the glory of the law was allegorically compared to the fading glory of the face of Moses. It was fading because Jesus would replace it. Notably, Moses was compared not to Christ, but to the Christian. Christ is the unfading glory itself, the embodiment of the new law that replaced the old. So in summary, Jesus is not Moses. Instead, he is the manna, the water, and the glory of God. Moses, the messenger, giving way to Jesus, the means of connecting with God. This is precisely the point of Hebrews chapter 3, verses 3 through 6. Jesus has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses, as much more glory as the builder of a house has more honor than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. Now Moses was faithful in all things, in all God's house as a servant, to testify to the things that were to be spoken later. But Christ is faithful over God's house as a son, and we are his house, if indeed we hold fast our confidence and our boasting in our hope. Nearly every author of the New Testament compared Moses with Jesus. This isn't surprising. So if the three major people that Jesus is compared to in the Old Testament, I shouldn't say that Jesus is compared to, but the three major fathers or figureheads in the Old Testament were who? Yeah, Abraham, Moses, and David. And he uses an interesting phrase. He doesn't mean it in a theological sense, but he calls them the three key figures of Israel's history. What's surprising in this is the case What's surprising is the ease with which the early believers portrayed Jesus as superior to Moses. Moses instituted the Passover. Jesus is the sacrificial Lamb of God. Moses offered manna. Jesus is the bread from heaven. Moses miraculously provided water from the rock. Jesus is that rock. Don't miss the gravity of this. Moses was revered in Israel, and I would say deservedly so. In fact, in a number of Jewish texts and traditions, he's given a semi-divine status. Nope, that's crossing the line. Does that happen in our day and age in any religious systems? Yeah. Well, anybody else in Catholicism? Semi-divine? Yeah. Mary? Yeah. Saints? Semi-divine. He was a Jewish superhero. To assert that a peasant carpenter outmatched the founder of the nation was an assault on religious sensibilities. What tectonic shift allowed such... Now, so we asked the question, this is what we were talking about earlier. What was it that allowed Jesus to be greater than Moses? Two primary things. Two primary things that were absolutely without question Jesus is greater than Moses. What are they? Okay, well, yes, of course. Okay, the resurrection's one. Yeah, and that I agree with our writer here, is his sinless life, right? Was Moses fit that category? Oh, Lord. How did he start out? Early in life. Yeah. And then, he didn't even get to go into the promised land after all that because of sin. Where he struck the rock, which you were referencing earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what tectonic shift allowed such an unprecedented exaltation of Jesus? How could they exalt Jesus over Moses against all cultural expectations? How did the early followers of Jesus convince crowds to believe such an assertion? See, this is what we're talking about this morning. This is something that they could have used in order to convince Is this an argument about Moses and that Jesus is greater than Moses? What context would that work in their evangelistic efforts? Would that have worked at Mars Hill? No. Hey, we don't care about him. Yeah, what do you mean? Right? So, but what context would it have worked in, and did it work in? Yeah, with the Jews. Were there many believing Jews? Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, there were. I mean, that's where the church basically started, was on the day of Pentecost. And basically, now in that sermon, Peter said that primarily Jesus was greater than who on that first sermon? Who was he comparing him to? One of the Hebrew Trinity. David, right? David's still in the tomb. But, see? So only two things can account for this title shift. First, Jesus' incomparable moral life demonstrated the power of God on human soil. Second, His irrefutable resurrection testified to God's vindication of His Son, that He was God. Without Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, there's no valid explanation for how He could come to have fulfilled the prophecy of Moses, let alone surpass His status. So, His life demonstrated the power of God on human soil, His moral life, and the fact that He resurrected from the dead. Those are the things that give us the ability to say, yes, He is the Messiah. And if there is such a thing, if you could find every single messianic prophecy that's in the Bible is obviously has to logically and necessarily be fulfilled in Jesus. So if there is one who the Messiah, if you could say, well, I could see how these other things were pointing to Jesus, but not necessarily Moses. Moses is somebody following after him. No, it has to be Jesus. There is no other logical conclusion. So, any questions, comments, thoughts? Very interesting study. I was very appreciative of that. Biblical, it's a typology in the person of Jesus and Moses. Great stuff. All right. Anybody have any thoughts? Anyone? What's that? Not really. No. How about that? You feel good?
No, I've had a couple.
You did?
The very first sentence was real.
Oh boy, here we go. The title.
Yes. Did Jesus fulfill the promise to replace Moses? He didn't replace Moses. It was just a title. I just got hung up on the word replace. I've been hung up on words all day. I've argued with it.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe you need to get some of Gary's pills. All right. So.
Speaking of that, Jesus twice. That happens to be at the hog up.
That's true. Yeah. You calling me a hog now? I've done been called a bull and a hog. What is happening?
We had a rodeo down there.
No. Okay. Think from the Jewish perspective. Think from the Jewish perspective about that sentence. If you were a believing Jew, Moses is in essence the law of Moses is being replaced. It is being fulfilled. It is being nailed to the cross, set aside. Jesus, when you talk about systems of salvation, the law system represented in Moses was replaced by the grace system represented in Jesus. So you're okay with that word?